Recyclico, making lithium-ion last forever. Recyclico's patented recycling process achieves up to 100% recovery of battery metals from lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, and aluminum. Recyclico Battery Materials Incorporated trades on the TSX Venture AMY, on the OTCQB AMYZF, and Frankfurt ID4. For more information, visit recyclicode.com or phone us at 778-574-4444. Recyclico, making lithium-ion last forever.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Do we have a special offer for our listeners?
Yeah, let's do our 50% off. We have a lot of inquiries based on what the market's doing, and a call for a down market here is starting to pay off, and details are in the newsletter. Go to VR Trader, Victor Robert, VRTrader.com, and when you order one of our letters or our forecast model, which is part and parcel to our forecast, you get 50% off, and the code and the promo code is 2022 half off. Also, as a disclosure, I'm not a financial advisor, nor do I provide financial advice. I'm just a newsletter writer, just keeping this record straight on that. But there is a promo code, 2022 half off. Please take advantage of it while it lasts.
Are we going into a market correction, or is this just a little shake-off that's happening and then we march even higher?
That could very well be the case. You know, I try to take it a day at a time. My models say down now. We have an election obviously coming up, and you know, there's a lot of variables out there. You know, everybody's worrying about the Fed. I'm more worried about what Putin is going to do and what the European, the NATO group is going to do in trying to aggravate the situation. I've been talking war and concerns about that more than I'm worrying about what the Fed doesn't do. In fact, there's a bill that's just been entered into the House of Representatives here. I think we mentioned it last week, to abolish the Fed. So I put that in the newsletter every week. Not even talked about in the financial press. Last time there was a bill entered to abolish the Fed was, I think it was 2008, and it's long overdue. But the Fed rates, it's just a bunch of noise. I'm telling you, people think if I talk about a solar CME, you know, solar flares and its effect on the planet, which we just saw in a very extraordinary way just the last week or so, you think, I'm wasting my time. Well, you're wasting your time worrying about the Fed because they're irrelevant. Inflation is here. It's getting worse. Commodities are moving up. They obviously have no control of it. And you've got a irresponsible Congress and president spending money like drunken sailors, and debt's going nuts, and we've got BRIC nations out there trying to replace the dollar backed by gold. So there's so many other, you know, variables. We just heard that President Trump was convicted on all charges, which is just a trumped-up situation on the part of the Democrats. It just there's so many other things going on. You know, there's risk of a civil war and international war, and I mean, you know, they're not even talking about Iran and Israel or you know, North Korea or China. I mean, it's really what's really happening. You know, you can't really believe anything. The government statistics everybody's looking for the economic report this week. The government numbers are unreliable. In my newsletter, we go into a lot of detail about the manipulation of the numbers. They change them. They're not correct. The only numbers I would possibly believe are industry-created numbers, not government-generated numbers. So we got oil market manipulations. The White House they recently said that they were withdrawing oil from the SPR. You know, the safe I know what the SPR actually stands for. It's the reserves. It's the reserves of oil. They were drawing from that, and then a few days later they come out saying they're going to renew it. This moves the oil market up and down. So they drain it, they refill it. It's like, it's a Three Stooges running the government here in terms of what policy is really unfolding. So you asked me a question. I think we're bearish now. It could be significant. It could be a nice shakeout, but we've learned over time, even going back to, the COVID crash where the Dow drops down to 18,000. It was in March 2020, and look where we are now, around the 39,000, 40,000 level. So 4 years it may seem like a long time. I guess if you're watching the market every moment, sure it is. But, seems like the worst crisis is, the money is being printed, and we've got the plunge protection team out there, the equity stabilization fund here in the U.S. All kinds of market manipulations occur, and the ultimate result is they generally take it to higher levels. So, what's going to happen in 2-3 years, and whether it's all going to come to an end, and we have some dramatic international event that changes all this. I don't have a crystal ball for that, but more than likely we get a shakeout, and then they try to rally them again, and then we'll just have to take it, a month or two at a time. I do cyclical work. We put our annual forecast model out, and we try to take each year as it comes and try to make some money with it. So that's really what it comes down to. But it seems like no matter how bad things are, actually I have this little list I put in the newsletter about all the crises we've had in the last, 50 years, any one of which you said could have ended the U.S. or the stock market. We all seem to come back at some point. So it seems like being a proverbial optimist, perennial optimist is the way to be, because they manipulate prices higher ultimately. But a bear now, and we'll just see how it unfolds this summer, and we'll take it from there.
Is the market too focused on just a few stocks, NVIDIA and Microsoft?
No question about it. The equal weighted index for the S&P, it shows you that it really has underperformed in a big way. Most stocks have not participated in the rally. But when you have 3 or 4 or even 7 big names moving the overall index up, and you own the index, many investors own the S&P, for example, or other indexes via an ETF, the net result is the same. You're making money. So if 493 stocks go nowhere, but 7 stocks go up and generate a positive return, you're looking at your account saying, "Oh, I'm okay with that." But if you own those other stocks and you're not only in an index, which has really been manipulated here by a handful of names, then you got problems. If you're just a believer that I'm going to own stocks that I like or companies that I think are going to do well, you may not have had a good year or two here in the market from what we've seen. Surprises have come from some very conservative companies. So it's just unfortunate, because we have the index is being manipulated. If we all could only own an equal weighted index, each stock is only weighted by its own percentage of the index, not by its price, then we'd have a fairer statement of what the market is doing. But it's just another form of manipulation, the way the indexes are calculated. And on top of that, you've got an index like the Dow Jones, which is constantly manipulated. In other words, if they don't like a stock in it or it's underperforming, they take it out and they put another hot stock in. And now there's rumors that they may want to put NVIDIA in the Dow Industrials average. Usually when that happens, by the way, it's when the biggest move has already occurred in the stock and they're late. It's already made, most of the move it's going to make over time. It's already had a big move. So if they stick NVIDIA in the Dow, and I don't know what stock they would take out, but something they don't like that's not performing well, that's another way of manipulating the index and making people believe things are doing better than they're really doing. So, I'm a very much a cynic about the markets. I've done this for decades. And when you see this type of manipulation and calculation, the way the indexes are calculated and prices are moved around, you become, very cynical about the markets. And as a result, that sort of, comes across in my analysis. We try to make money with stuff, but, at the same time, we're trying to reflect the reality of what's really going on out there. So anyway, we've got that issue, Jim, and you just got to, play it as you see it. Right now Nvidia is coming off its highs. It had a big move. I was going to get short it the last couple of days, and I just figured I don't want the aggravation because it's so manipulated, and there's so much talk about the 10-for-1 split coming up. But it's coming down. It's going to probably now drop anywhere from 100 to 200 points off its high and correct itself after this big runoff. So we'll see how much it pulls back here. That 10-for-1 split's coming, I think, the first week of June. So $1,100 stock will be $100 stock. So history generally says that creates some buying interest in it. And then what they'll do, we'll go from 100 to 150 or 200 again. I guess that's possible. I mean, he did it with a lot of other names over the decades. So just have to trade it. That's all you can do.
What's going on with gold?
Also pulling back here a little bit, this expression throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If the market starts coming down here, which I believe is the case, and we're getting a correction, even though gold is a hedge, and it broke out and it's got much higher targets and we're overall bullish, it suffers from the syndrome of, people having to liquidate positions, and if other stocks are coming down and they need money, gold can suffer just as much. So not a bear on it, but we did put some hedges on just in case it does have a bit more of a correction. So I'm looking for more of a correction here in the next couple of months in gold, and then back up again. So you have to look to our newsletter for some of the details. But it's like stocks. I'm also worried about Bitcoin the same way. I love it. It's got much higher targets. It might fool me and just break out here and run into $80,000-$90,000, which is one of our targets right away. But I could see also where it pulls back here and consolidates with gold in the stock market for a period of time and resumes its move later. So we're in this time frame. Sell may go away. I think we might have put that as a headline in one of our recent interviews. People laugh at it, but I think it's working out. So these adages that have been around forever, like we use Turnaround Tuesday in our commentary. There's a history, not 100%, but markets can change direction intraday or during the day on Tuesdays. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or why is there the Santa Claus rally or the turkey shoot rally, for example? So why is there, for example, end of the month window dressing, which is going on to a certain extent with some stocks now as the last 2 days of the month come to an end. Money managers, they want to own stocks that have been hot to make their portfolios look, better or more legitimate. So sometimes stocks do crazy things the last couple of days of the month. So these are all patterns that we try to identify and, consistently repeat. So that's the best reply I have for that question, I think.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, what's the story for crude?
Still very bullish overall, but I think it's also in the same short-term cyclic pattern here. We're holding our oil stocks. We've actually added a couple. I think it's not going down very much. If it is, natural gas had a nice run up, and that's pulling back here a little bit. How can I say it's giving up a little ground here. I'm holding positions, but it's not like unlike anything else that we're talking about. That we're in this time frame where people taking off for the summer, less trading volume and activity around. Markets that have been hot, tend to consolidate, and of course, overnight something could change in the Mideast or in the geopolitical sphere where suddenly it explodes. That's why I want to keep our positions, because I still think, they're much higher targets. One of the numbers actually I came up with, it might be a 2-year or 3-year comment, is $192 a barrel for crude. So, when you have name investors like Warren Buffett buying Occidental Petroleum, and he's been right up to this point, and he's taking that longer term view, and I have come up with these dramatically higher targets. Sometimes you're better off just sitting, particularly if they pay some dividends, which most of them do. So, own the oil stocks that pay the dividends. One of our big winners was Pioneer Oil and Gas. which we had on the list for a couple of years on and off, and it got bought out by Exxon just recently, and that worked out pretty well, particularly with the very high dividends it was paying. So I just think it's a good core holding, just like Warren is holding Occidental Petroleum.
Is there any renewed interest in uranium with the U.S. planning to ban imports of Russian uranium?
We talked about this last week about I think that story. Uranium has come back. I mean, CCJ, Cameco has moved back up again. The uranium itself pulled back a little bit. It's still off its highs. Still looks okay to me. I just think, it had a little correction, and it's a strategic metal, unlike lithium, with the EV issue, where you could argue well, maybe lithium is cool for a while because of the slowness in the EV market right now and the interest more in hybrids and so forth. But I know uranium is more strategic in terms of defense, in terms of all kinds of new technologies, and demand around the world for nuclear power, and the whether Russia's sales to the U.S. being banned or restricted is going to make a difference or not. I would think it'd be more bullish, particularly for a company like Cameco, which is still North American based. So I'm still bullish.
On the cryptocurrency front, you mentioned Bitcoin. Is it in a flux phase as well? We don't know if it's kind of peaked out right now, or is it just going to march higher and ignore the markets?
Well, there's a big support level in Bitcoin around the 56,000 level. You're in the mid to high 60s, and if we can clear 72,000, the recent high, then I think we're going to probably 90,000 plus, pretty fast, just on a big either short squeeze or dramatic move. If it takes out that 55, 56, or tests that this summer, it wouldn't surprise me. It's a big different story, Jim, compared to where we were, last year or so, where, Bitcoin is 15,000 or 20,000 and way down there after such a big move. You have so much volatility in that market now. It's hard to call. I would tend to lean a little more cautious only because it's the summer months and other markets that, as I mentioned, could be correcting here. But, we're holding Ethereum and Bitcoin because of the explosive potential it has, particularly if the recent highs come out for whatever reason, whether it's geopolitical or whether it's just a short squeeze or just renewed demand for them, because we know the big trend's up. I mean, there's no question about it. And Ethereum is going to have approval pretty soon for its own ETF that's rumored coming out of the SEC, and just so much world demand now for an alternate currency. So everybody's concerned the U.S. dollar is going to go down. It may eventually. I think it can go up for a while, particularly with the gold being accumulated by central banks, which drives the dollar higher. But even so, I still think there's going to be demand for an alternate currency. I mean, there's so many places in the world where you only can transact business using a cryptocurrency. Here in the U.S., we have all these, or in Canada, we have all these alternative methods, but you could be, in Africa somewhere, you don't have any ATM that you can go to, or, a local bank branch and so forth. You know what I mean? So much transactions are conducted worldwide in the crypto, and particularly in the Bitcoin. So, it's here to stay. And, I can't predict moment to moment here. We are holding a position, but I understand the risk that it could pull back into that mid-50s perhaps, and then we'll have to deal with our trades at that point. But it wouldn't surprise me if it broke out into new highs and surprised the bears and ran to a new all-time high here this summer just as easily. So playing the trend here is important to me. I mean, I just think this, now that we also have this halving of the Bitcoin. Every several years they have the amount of Bitcoins available, and that's just a technological question. I can't answer how they do that, but the studies that I've seen is within a couple months of the halving, which just occurred, Bitcoin tends to move higher. So we just passed a halving point in the Bitcoin, and that's historically, of course, we don't have 100 years of data here. We've only got a couple decades of data because it's only been around since around 2010 or 11. But the patterns is higher after that halving. So keep your positions. That would be my recommendation, and just don't look at it.
Anything happening on the geocosmic front?
Yeah, we have some solar stuff going on, some CMEs. it's really interesting what's going on here. We've had that big solar flare, which affected us, and then it sort of went away. And then what's happening is, and I'm not a scientist on this, but I'm just watching the news that's reported, on Space Weather or a lot of other websites. So these big solar spots are rotating around the sun, and they're not going away, and may even be increasing in size. So as they turn toward the Earth, that sets up the risk for these super flares. And we've had just the recent days, we've had some flares, and it hit some shortwave radio broadcasts on the planet. I know Elon Musk is concerned, if you get another big one, it could knock out Starlink and so forth. So, there's real practical risk for talking about this. Whether you can do anything about it is another story, but apparently these spots are still there. They're not dissipating, and there's some huge prominences shooting off from the sun. So you could sit here and just say, oh, so what? This has been around for millions of years, and it's not going to affect us. But it's already affected us. And actually with these flares just recently, you may not have seen it immediately, but in some places on the planet, besides watching auroras, there were some blackouts or interference with communications and so forth. So it's still going on. We're in a high solar period now. It would be surprising if there's some dramatic event, in weeks, months ahead, maybe tied to this cyclical correction I've been talking about for the markets, where you get a Carrington type event like we saw back in 1859, and that really that would put a sense of reality into our world. That suddenly we're affected by something that we can't control. We think we can control everything, but Mother Nature has other plans for us. So anyway, we monitor it. It's just interesting that we're in this high solar period now. So anyway, that's the most current reading on it. And if your listeners are interested, just go to spaceweather.com. They actually track the flares and the prominences and the sunspots and the emissions and so forth. It's also funny that it affects other planets in the solar system. And one of the reports that came in, one of the sun spots was facing toward Mars and then toward Venus. It wasn't necessarily facing toward the Earth. It depends on where the planet is in relation to the spot. So these other planets are affected, and it's not only the Earth. So it just depends, where the sun decides that to focus the activity. So it's an ongoing situation. It's happening now, and we'll see how it all plays out. It's just fun to watch. It's like watching. I should have been a weatherman. I enjoy watching weather, forecasting weather. Meteorology was one of my hobbies. So just following these type of patterns, it's just maybe it's all part and parcel to being in the stock market. Trying to forecast, and whether you're forecasting weather or sunspots, you're forecasting stocks. It's all cycles. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, we're supposed to be able to see the Northern Lights this weekend in Vancouver, except like most weekends when something spectacular in the sky happens, Vancouver's expected to be cloudy.
Oh, okay. Well, we just have to hope it's nothing more than the auroras and nothing, real significant that knocks out communications and satellites and so forth. So, I mean, there was an event 42,000 years ago, and I think I mentioned to it, very briefly in our last interview we posted at the end of our newsletter. Let's see, what the name of it is. I remember correctly, the Adams event, and this happened 42,000 years ago. They documented it. Was in a recent article. So basically, because of the Earth wobble and because of a solar involvement at that time, the magnetic field was affected on the planet, and by doing that, it just knocked out a lot of life on the Earth, and it caused all kinds of dramatic stuff. But it was all related to the sun and the shifts in the they call the grand solar minimum periods of solar activity and maximum periods of activity. And this happened, they call the Adams event, and they have documented. And you say 40,000 years ago. Well, what's that mean? Well, maybe we're due for another one. So there are shifts in the magnetic field related to the sun. And forget the Carrington event. This was even more dramatic. So there's a shift in the magnetic field. That changes. Could change life on Earth. It could mean what's cold areas are now warm areas. Antarctica becomes tropical, for example. That type of event could unfold. So that's part of the theory. And of course I'm pretty well read on this, but the bottom line is dramatic events happen on the planet quickly. Everybody assumes everything is slow, like really slow. But from the research that I've done and some of the stuff that's coming up in the geologic records says it's usually a dramatic event, really fast. Suddenly there's a polar shift or a Carrington event, and suddenly things happen really fast and dramatically, or there's plate shifts on the planet, the continental shelves move around, and they're very liquid, and they suddenly shift dramatically, and suddenly you're dead. It's like we think it's a stable planet and very calm and serene, and then finally we find out, we already see there are dramatic events already, but nothing to this extent. But the planet has a history of suddenly, you in 1 second to the next, things could change much more dramatically than we really want to believe can happen. So it's funny, I think we worry about the stock market. We want to take care of ourselves and our families and our lives and enjoy our existence here on Earth. And so much of it is out of our control. So we can pray all day, eat healthy foods, be good neighbors and parents, and boom, Earth shifts and you're dead.
We're just little
really crazy. But
we're just little bugs on a speck of dust hurling through the universe at 1,000,000 miles a day.
Right. They say this Adams event, for example, might have knocked out the Neanderthals back 40,000 years ago. Why they suddenly disappeared so quickly? It could have been because of this, magnetic shift of the poles related to the sun, and they weren't able to survive because climate conditions changed so quickly. So it's fun. It's important. We track weather, and NASA is very much on top of asteroid tracking and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of reports that are just not talked about in the news at all, and you have to really research and dig for it. But there's stuff going on in the extraterrestrial world and the geocosmic world every day that we just don't hear about or talk about, and a lot of close calls out there. But I guess they don't want to panic people, and that's just the nature of the media. So hopefully that covers that point. Thank you for asking.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRtrader.com. He was speaking to us from Arizona. If you have any questions for Mark or for any of our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.